The air in the courtroom was thick with tension. The audience, a mix of curious onlookers, was anxiously waiting for the next case to unfold. It was an ordinary day in the courtroom, with the usual crowd of defendants, lawyers, and bystanders filling the seats. The buzz was low, with whispers floating in the room. But then, the case of Ali, a young teenager, was called. As the courtroom doors swung open, a hush fell over the crowd. Ali walked into the courtroom with his head held low, wearing a worn-out denim jacket and a nervous look on his face. He was just 16 years old, and the last place anyone would expect to see him was in a courtroom, let alone standing in front of a judge. His steps were slow, measured, as if the weight of the world was on his shoulders. His hands gripped the legal documents he was holding, knuckles turning white. He had no idea how things had come to this. The judge, Judge Aisha, looked up from her papers as Ali approached the stand. She was a seasoned professional, known for her calm demeanor and no-nonsense attitude. With her gray hair pulled back into a neat bun and glasses perched on the edge of her nose, she exuded authority. Her expression was stern, yet there was something about her that commanded respect. As she looked at Ali, she didn't show any sign of surprise. She had seen many cases in her years as a judge, but this one was different. A teenager standing in front of her for something serious. She adjusted her glasses, scanning him carefully, and then asked in a clear, strong voice, "State your name and the charges against you." Ali's voice trembled slightly as he answered, "My name is Ali, and I've been accused of vandalizing public property." The room grew even quieter as everyone focused on the teenager. Vandalism, a crime that was usually associated with older, more rebellious individuals, not someone as young as him. It didn't make sense. Judge Aisha's sharp eyes narrowed as she glanced at the file in front of her. The documents in her hands showed a series of accusations against Ali, with evidence pointing toward the fact that he had been involved in damaging the walls of a public library. A couple of months ago, the library had been found with graffiti covering its exterior, an act that was now causing trouble for the community. The charges were serious, and the community had been pushing for justice. Ali shifted uncomfortably, and Judge Aisha could see the fear in his eyes. He wasn't like the others. There was a nervousness about him, something that didn't fit with the image of someone who would commit such a crime. She continued reading the case file before looking back at Ali. "The evidence is clear," she said, her voice firm. "The fine for this offense is $500, along with 40 hours of community service." Ali felt his heart drop. The fine was steep for someone his age, and the thought of community service felt like an added punishment. He had never imagined that his life would take such a turn. He had always been a good student, never involved in trouble. But what people didn't know was that this wasn't just any ordinary case. Ali had a secret that no one in the room could have imagined. As Judge Aisha prepared to finish the formalities of the case, Ali stood in front of her, looking down at his shoes. He could feel the weight of the decision hanging in the air. The judge's gaze was unwavering, as if she was waiting for something. But Ali wasn't going to let this moment pass without saying something. After all, he knew that what he was about to do would change everything. With a deep breath, Ali stood up straighter, his nervousness melting away. He opened his mouth to speak, his voice clear and steady this time. "Judge Aisha," he began, causing the entire courtroom to fall silent. "I am not just a teenager standing here before you. I am also a lawyer in disguise." The words hit like a thunderclap. The entire courtroom, including the judge, froze. People exchanged confused looks, trying to figure out if this was some kind of joke. Was he serious? The judge raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical, and leaned forward slightly. But Ali wasn't finished. He continued, "I have been studying law for years. I may look like a teenager, but I know more about the law than most people here. I didn't commit this crime. I didn't vandalize the library." The suspense in the room was palpable. Ali's confession had just taken the courtroom drama to a whole new level. The judge, who had seen many cases over the years, was now unsure of what to believe. Ali's words had not only surprised Judge Aisha, but had left the entire room on edge. Everyone was now wondering the same thing. Was Ali telling the truth, or was he simply trying to avoid the consequences of his actions? And if he was telling the truth, what would happen next? The stage was set for something truly unexpected, and the tension in the courtroom was only beginning to rise. The room was still, as if time had momentarily stopped. Every pair of eyes in the courtroom was fixed on Ali, the teenager standing before the judge. His words hung heavily in the air. "I am a lawyer in disguise." The shock of his declaration rippled through the room, leaving everyone speechless. Judge Aisha leaned back in her chair, her sharp eyes narrowing as she processed what Ali had just said. Her hand instinctively moved to adjust her glasses, a gesture that often signaled her need for clarity in moments of confusion. Ali's voice was steady, yet there was a vulnerability to his words. He had spoken the truth, and now there was no turning back. The courtroom remained silent, as if waiting for the judge to react. The murmurs among the audience grew louder, whispers of disbelief filling the space. "A lawyer," some people muttered. "He looks like just another teenager." Ali could feel the weight of their skepticism, but he was determined to prove them wrong. He had to. The last thing he wanted was to be seen as someone who was simply trying to get out of trouble. He had worked for years to hide his legal knowledge, to keep his abilities a secret, but today he had no choice but to reveal it. Judge Aisha stared at him, her expression unreadable. "A lawyer in disguise," she repeated slowly, her voice tinged with doubt. "Tell me, young man, what makes you think you can just claim to be a lawyer?" Her tone was firm but not unkind. She was trying to make sense of what Ali had said, but a part of her was still unsure whether this was a desperate attempt to avoid punishment or a truth that needed to be acknowledged. Ali took a deep breath and stepped forward, his confidence growing with every passing second. "Judge Aisha," he began, his voice now filled with conviction, "I know what you're thinking, but let me show you. Let me explain how I know the law, how I've studied it in secret. You see, I've always had a passion for justice, for understanding how the system works. My father is a lawyer, and though I've never told anyone, I've been learning from him since I was very young." The judge's interest peaked, but she remained silent, her gaze fixed on him. Ali continued, "I know how the law works, and I understand its nuances. I've spent years reading legal textbooks, studying court cases, and even attending legal seminars under a different name. I may be young, but that doesn't mean I'm ignorant. What I'm telling you is the truth. I didn't commit the crime I'm being accused of." A murmur of surprise ran through the courtroom. The idea that a teenager could have such knowledge seemed impossible to the people who were listening. The judge, however, was not easily swayed. She leaned forward, her hands resting on the desk. "If you truly are a lawyer," she said slowly, "then show me. Prove to me that you know what you're talking about." Ali hesitated for a moment. This was it. This was the moment where he either proved himself or lost everything. But deep down, he knew he could do this. He had spent countless hours studying the law, learning how to speak like a professional, how to argue with precision. He could do this. "I'm not asking for any special treatment, Judge," Ali said, his eyes now meeting hers. "I'm asking for a fair chance to prove my innocence. If I can show you that the evidence against me is flawed, then I should not be fined or forced into community service." His voice was firm now, filled with the confidence of someone who had been practicing this moment in his mind for years. Judge Aisha took a deep breath. She was not used to such challenges in her courtroom, but there was something about Ali's words that intrigued her. His calmness, his clarity. It was all too precise to be a lie. She could sense that he was not just another rebellious teenager trying to talk his way out of trouble. This was different. "All right," Judge Aisha said, her tone now softened but still commanding. "You claim to know the law. Then I will give you a chance to prove it. Present your case. A gasp of disbelief went through the room. The judge, one of the most respected in the city, was actually giving Ali a chance to present his defense. It was unheard of. But there was something in her eyes, a flicker of curiosity, a hint of belief that made the room quiet again. Ali stepped forward confidently, pulling out a thick legal textbook from his bag. His heart raced, but his mind was sharp. He began to point out specific legal precedents, showing the judge that the case against him had holes. He explained how the evidence was circumstantial and how there had been mistakes made in the investigation. He quoted laws and cases that were relevant to his defense, each argument building on the last, showing Judge Aisha that he was no ordinary teenager. The courtroom watched in stunned silence. Ali's arguments were logical, clear, and well-founded. He wasn't just making excuses. He was presenting a solid defense. It was clear to everyone in the room that Ali knew what he was talking about. He wasn't just a teenager. He was a young lawyer, capable of challenging the system with intelligence and poise. Judge Aisha listened intently, her expression slowly changing. For the first time, she seemed to believe him. She had seen many cases in her years as a judge, but never had she seen a teenager with such legal knowledge and determination. The room was still, and Ali's words echoed in the silence. This was only the beginning. As Ali finished his defense, the courtroom sat in stunned silence. The air was thick with tension, as every single person in the room tried to process what had just unfolded. The young teenager, who had entered the courtroom moments ago, looking nervous and out of place, had just presented a case that was not only convincing but nearly flawless. His confidence was now undeniable. The judge, who had once been skeptical, was now leaning forward, her expression filled with curiosity and something else: admiration. Judge Aisha, usually a figure of authority who had seen countless cases in her career, couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. She had listened to Ali's every word, weighing his arguments carefully, and with each point he made, she found herself more and more convinced of his legal prowess. For a moment, she even found herself questioning the very evidence that had initially seemed so clear. Could it be that this teenager, so young and unassuming, had uncovered flaws that had been overlooked? Ali was now standing tall, his heart pounding in his chest. He had always dreamed of a moment like this, a chance to stand in front of a judge and prove himself not just as a teenager, but as a capable legal mind. His mind raced as he thought back to the countless hours he had spent studying, memorizing legal principles, and learning about the law. His father had always told him that one day his hard work would pay off, but Ali had never imagined it would happen in such a dramatic way. As the silence stretched on, the audience sat in disbelief. A few people in the back whispered among themselves, still trying to wrap their heads around what they had just witnessed. A teenager had just used legal jargon like an experienced attorney, pointing out discrepancies in a case that many had thought was airtight. It was as though they had all just been thrown into an alternate reality where the impossible became possible. But then, something happened that no one expected. Judge Aisha looked up from the documents in front of her, her brow furrowed. She took a long pause, letting the tension build in the room. For a moment, it seemed as if she was about to deliver a verdict. But instead, she cleared her throat and spoke in a calm, measured voice. "I have to admit, Ali, your argument is well constructed. I have never encountered a defendant who has presented such a compelling case on their own, especially not one so young." Ali felt a surge of hope rising within him. Could she be about to drop the charges? Was this the moment he had been waiting for? But Judge Aisha wasn't done. However, she continued, her voice carrying a weight that made everyone in the room sit up straighter. "There is one thing that concerns me deeply." The room seemed to hold its breath. Everyone in the courtroom leaned forward, unsure of what was coming next. Ali's heart skipped a beat. Had he missed something? Had his argument somehow fallen short? He looked up at the judge, waiting for her to finish. Judge Aisha paused again, then slowly lowered her gaze to the case file before her. She had seen many defendants try to play the system, But Ali's case was different. She had listened to him carefully, and in many ways, she was impressed. But as she examined the evidence again, something about the situation didn't add up. There was something more at play here than just a young boy trying to avoid punishment. Suddenly, Ali's words from earlier echoed in her mind. "I am a lawyer in disguise," he had said. Could there be more to this story? Could Ali be hiding something bigger than anyone could have imagined? With a sharp exhale, Judge Aisha made her decision. "Ali," she said, looking him directly in the eye, "I'm going to give you a chance to prove what you've just said. But there's a condition." The room went silent once more. This was a twist no one had seen coming. Ali's pulse raced as he tried to focus on the judge's next words. What was she about to say? What could she mean by "prove it"? Judge Aisha stood, her voice steady but commanding. "You claim to be a lawyer, but I need more than just words. I need proof. I'm going to give you an opportunity to demonstrate your legal knowledge in a real scenario. If you can successfully argue a case in my courtroom, I will consider your defense. If you fail, the consequences will be severe." The challenge hung in the air like a weight. Everyone in the courtroom was stunned. Was this really happening? A teenager had just been given the chance to argue a case in front of a judge. An actual case. It was an opportunity that very few lawyers had, let alone a young boy with no formal legal training. Ali's mind raced as he processed what Judge Aisha had just proposed. He had expected to prove his innocence, but this was something else entirely. A part of him felt a rush of excitement. This was the challenge he had always dreamed of, but another part of him felt a cold knot of fear in his stomach. He had never argued a case in front of a real audience before. Could he do it? Could he actually convince Judge Aisha that he was more than just a teenager? As the courtroom buzzed with disbelief, Ali knew that the real test had just begun. This twist was not just a chance for him to escape punishment. It was a chance to prove that he truly deserved to be called a lawyer. The room was on edge, and all eyes were on Ali. Would he rise to the challenge, or would he crumble under the pressure? The next few minutes would determine his fate, and the fate of his future. The tension in the courtroom was almost unbearable as Ali stood there, his heart pounding in his chest. The weight of Judge Aisha's challenge was heavy on his shoulders. He had been given the chance to prove himself, but there was no turning back now. The courtroom had fallen silent, waiting for him to speak, to take on the challenge she had laid before him. He could feel the eyes of everyone on him, from the judge to the spectators in the gallery, all of them waiting for him to rise to the occasion. His mind raced as he tried to gather his thoughts. Could he really do this? Could he prove to the world that he wasn't just a teenager in over his head, but a lawyer capable of standing in the courtroom? He had always dreamed of becoming a lawyer, of being able to make a difference in the world through the power of knowledge and reason. But until now, it had always been just a dream he practiced for in secret, hiding his abilities behind the walls of his small room, away from the judgment of others. But now, the dream had become a reality, and the challenge that lay before him was unlike anything he had ever faced. Taking a deep breath, Ali stepped forward, his legs feeling a little unsteady, but his resolve growing stronger with each passing second. Judge Aisha had given him a rare and precious opportunity. She had recognized his potential, seen something in him that no one else had. And now it was up to him to prove her right. Ali turned to the case file that was still on the table, the one that had started all of this. He had studied the facts of the case over and over again, memorized the key points, and thought about the best way to present them. But now, with the weight of the courtroom on him, his mind felt like a blur. He took another deep breath and began to speak. "Your Honor," Ali began, his voice steady but filled with the nerves of a young person standing at the edge of their future. "I know that this case against me seems clear. The evidence points to me as the one who caused the damage. But there are things that don't add up, and I'm here today to show you that the truth isn't what it seems." The judge watched him closely, her expression softening ever so slightly. Ali could see that she was listening, really listening to him. He continued, his words coming more easily now. The first thing I want to address is the timing of the incident. The witness who identified me as the person who vandalized the library made their statement hours after the crime was supposed to have occurred. There's a large gap between the time of the supposed crime and when the witness saw me. It's entirely possible that the witness misidentified me or saw someone else. The evidence is not as clear-cut as it may seem. Ali paused, looking up to make sure Judge Aisha was following his argument. She nodded slightly, her eyes focused on him, giving him the courage to continue. There's also the issue of motive. Why would I, a teenager who was focused on my studies, risk my future by committing such an offense? I've never been in trouble with the law before, and I have no reason to damage public property. The motive simply isn't there. Ali's voice was gaining strength now. He could feel the confidence building within him as he made his case. His words were flowing more naturally, and he could see that the people in the courtroom were starting to pay attention. I didn't do this, Ali said firmly, his voice steady. And I'm not asking for leniency because I'm a teenager. I'm asking for the truth to be heard. I'm asking for a chance to prove that the justice system works for everyone, no matter their age. A few moments of silence passed as Ali finished his statement. Judge Aisha sat back in her chair, her fingers tapping lightly on the edge of the desk. The room was still, no one daring to speak. The weight of the situation hung heavily in the air. Ali had done it. He had made his case, and now it was up to Judge Aisha to decide. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Judge Aisha broke the silence. Ali, she said, her voice calm and measured, I have listened to you, and I believe you. Your knowledge of the law, your reasoning, and your determination have convinced me. I see now that you are not just a teenager trying to get out of trouble. You are someone who has worked hard to learn and understand the law. And for that, I respect you. Ali's heart skipped a beat. Had she really just said that? He could hardly believe it. He had expected a harsh verdict, maybe even a reminder that he was still a minor and had to face the consequences. But instead, Judge Aisha was acknowledging his efforts, his passion, and his potential. I am going to drop the fine and the community service, Judge Aisha continued. But I want you to remember this moment. You have a future in law if you choose it. The road ahead of you will not always be easy, but you have shown today that you have the heart and mind to succeed. I'm proud of you, Ali. The words hit him like a wave, and for a moment, he couldn't find the words to speak. His eyes welled with tears, but he quickly wiped them away. This was the moment he had dreamed of for so long, and now it was happening. He had been given a chance to pursue his passion, to prove that age was just a number, and that determination could overcome any obstacle. The courtroom erupted into applause, and Ali looked around, feeling a warmth spread through him. For the first time in his life, he felt like he truly belonged in this world of law, justice, and possibility. As he left the courtroom that day, his heart was full of hope. His journey had just begun, and he knew that he was ready for whatever came next. The future was his to shape, and with a strong foundation of hard work and knowledge, he would make it count.